Hello and welcome to Thursday, the 4th day of December. I was just looking at my folders where I do my shows, where I transfer the shows into the operating system, into my TriCaster. And every year, when it comes to December, and I look at this absurd amount of shows, it's 250 shows or more, it strikes you, right? That holy shit, that's my life for the last year. Trying to do something good. You don't realize sometimes what goes into a year, right? This year is not over. And tonight we're going to cover right away the stories we normally can't get to. We're just going to cover those headlines. That's quite the ordeal. And so I'll be back after this intro. It's a little over 3 minutes. It's called The Enrichment Man, and you'll find it on James Luce's site on YouTube. We'll see you right after.
You said the world needs power, I won't disagree. There's heat in the ground and the wind runs free. You call nuclear the future, but it won't power itself. Nuclear relies on coal more than coal needs itself. You said crypto was coming and demand would explode, that AI would load what the grid couldn't hold. But SMRs stay delayed, no ground ever breaks, and the public pays out while the promise remakes. You said it's the hour, but the plan's still the same. The technology is analog from the Cold War days. There's no place for the waste, and yuccas refused. Vented dry cast containers become the only refuge. You say you lead the charge with a federal hand. Would you vote Price Anderson or stand with the land? You call it advanced, but the cycle's well known, still chasing a fuel that should have stayed in the stone. They brought in the waste with no warning or word. No records were filed and no voices were heard. The workers got sick, yet their claims were denied. But their jobs paid well, or so at the time. Say the same line again, just a little more vague. Let the cost wash away while the lobbyists wave. It's the same old plan with a new name again. And the public keeps paying again and again. The words that you sign will be printed and praised with a ribbon and stamp on a speech full of praise. This is abundance, they'll claim as they lead. But nuclear won't build what the future will need.
It's a great song, man. I'll put a link in the description for you. And just give me a second here. I was a little late trying to import the show tonight. It's a pretty big one, as usual, unfortunately, but it's bigger than normal. And I didn't have enough room left on my hard drive. It makes me laugh when I think about it. So I had to delete some stuff in order to be able to import the show, which is 260 megabytes or something. And that put me a couple of minutes behind schedule. So I'm just, as we're talking here now, I'm importing the rest of the show. You'll see it go bloop, bloop. That's a part of the show. And then I have to import the other folder, so it'll take us another minute to get up here to nutty speed. And it's Friday for Dana. My shows start on Sunday. And then on Thursday, hopefully there's no major events the weekend, or there we go. Okay, now I got to pick up deer. So the Great Lakes is surrounded by nuclear, but not Lake Superior, which is really bizarre, which is the upper lake. So nuclear runs downhill, not uphill, so to speak, right? So they kind of left the Lake Superior, at least in this model we're looking at. I haven't been able to find the time to fact check it. It's a well-known model. It's been around a very long time, so there probably are things that are missing, no doubt. Okay, and then we'll get rocking. I'll just import that. Then, and only then, can we get started. So the nuclear industry is the same gigawatts now as it was in the 90s, the mid-90s. And between 2022, 2023, 2024, 2023 was 360 something gigawatts of solar, not counting all the other so-called renewables, but there's 360 gigabytes of solar. And last year was 660. So it almost doubled. This year they were expecting, by the end of this year, around 920 gigawatts, which means you're talking about 2,000 gigawatts of electricity in just solar in 3 years. And the total capacity used worldwide daily at any given minute, the continuous use is around 3,350 gigawatts. So solar produced, and not counting other stuff, right, just solar, produced almost half of the total world's capacity of energy. And so the minute you pair that with storage, and this is why you see nuclear panicking, and you see all these promises that everybody that's regular here is very familiar with, right? All these promises of a nuclear renaissance, of a small modular reactor, and they don't have any. The smallest reactor they're building is the boiling water reactor X, the Canadian reactor. It's a 24-story building. It's 240-something feet, 239 and a half feet or something. Fukushima's reactors are 190 feet. So they call the boiling water small modular reactor boiling water X300 a small modular reactor is completely dishonest. It's like your husband or your wife goes out to buy a small car for just running around town. She comes back with the world's biggest transport truck with a blown engine. Right? Because they can't produce a small modular reactor, but the public has been bombarded with those connotations, with that framing, that framed the narrative that it actually exists or something. All right, here we go. I was looking at, there's a story I'm doing about Palace Day, Chris Singh's Holtec nuclear plant. They got a guaranteed $1.something billion from the zombie administration, Biden administration. This is a Great Lakes region, but at the top of it, up you can see Lake Superior. There wasn't any nuclear on that, which really, was, I'm not sure when he produced this. We got screen captures of it coming up, 2013. So it was interesting that the lower Great Lakes, which is the Great Lakes, in case you're not aware, is the third biggest freshwater aquifer on the entire planet. Freshwater, and we don't have a lot of land mass compared to the ocean, for instance. And so Lake Superior, the Great Lakes are completely contaminated. Now the Great Lakes are supplying water to tens of millions of people. You have multiple reactor meltdowns on the Great Lakes. All these reactors, for instance, have are constantly emitting massive amount of radiation every minute from the fuel pools, for instance. They're dumping it directly into the river from all these fuel facilities legally. They all have pipes running into the ocean. They also all have incinerators. And these Great Lakes also supply tens of thousands of farms, maybe 100,000 farms. And so then the poll tonight was meant to bring some attention, because this is terrible that they're doing something like that. Did the nuclear industry, with malice, intentionally poison the Great Lakes? It's supposed to be for the last 80 years, and millions of people and thousands of farms. Well, I couldn't put tens of thousands because I can only put 100 digits there, right? But that is so significant, and that sums it up in a small nutshell. The damage is much more far-reaching than this, unfortunately. So you're producing radioactive food in all those farms that are using water from those lakes, which is no longer lakes, they're nuclear ship oils, right? They're nuclear sinkholes. And then you have proposed deep geological repositories. You have some of these are closed plants. It was interesting. Operating reactors you see over in the corner and closed nuclear power reactors are almost the same color code. So it's very difficult. It's very easy to confuse one with the other. And I don't understand, if you're worried about it, why you would color code that. Well, a closed reactor still has fuel pools. It still has emissions, horrific emissions from the sites. The sites are still incredibly radioactive. We're going to run through. At some point, I'm going to just bring in the rest of this stuff. So Palace Day, and I'll probably butcher the name, which is, when you think about what I deal with, reactors worldwide and all the different languages, is no big surprise. I remember doing a radio show, talk show. It was a main syndicated radio show. I can't remember the lady's name. She died since. And I was talking to her just before we went live, right? And that was my first time on her show. And I was asking her, which plant are we talking about? She said, well, you're the expert, you should know. There's over 400 nuclear power plants. Right? So, there's a lot to remember. There's just a whole lot of things to know about each one of them to be accurate, right? So I didn't even have time to prepare for it. Lucky for me, it was I don't remember the plant. Just, far ahead. I'd done around 600 interviews, radio shows, blogs, and everything when we were doing research expeditions post-Fukushima. So let's get after it just for a little bit. So I'm going to run through news that I'm not going to get to tonight. Like every day, I'm going through absurd amount of stories. But you can only cover so much in a show or a presentation, whatever you want to call it. A lot of these are presentations. I call them shows because they're 5 days a week, et cetera, but it's actually an educational program is what it really is. Here we go. Here we rock and roll. Just always takes me a few moments, just my eyeballs to... But tonight we'll kind of give you a special insight into now this is a 24-hour news cycle we're going to run through. We're going to run through this. So strap yourselves in and hang on tight. The Geiger counter is live up in the corner. It's over right here. You bastard. You're always scaring me. Deep isolation. This this company wants to dig a mile deep hole and put a reactor there. If it melts down, who cares? We'll just plug the hole. So they're very dangerous people. And the nuclear industry loves them. Deep isolation has two things, right, where they're going to store nuclear waste in a deep hole, and they're also going to put reactors in deep holes. There's two different stories about them tonight. And they're coming to you from a lobbying group, World Nuclear News. These are very terrible people. You'll never see their names on a story. Deep isolation completes a 3-year waste canister project. So they put a canister there for 3 years in deep underground. They're going to use that to quantify putting it there for 1 million years. Right? It doesn't work. The logic doesn't work in that scenario. Right? This is putting it there for 3 years is not going to quantify that it's going to be safe. It simply doesn't work that way because of electrolysis, different metals, materials in the soil, everything else. Ontario and Bulgaria signed a large-scale nuclear support agreement. So when you see headlines like this, these memorandum of understandings, this is just meant to trigger a stock market rally where stock markets will run out now and sell stocks in the nuclear industry, different facets of the nuclear industry, based upon going to be an increase or a need for more fuel, and therefore that justifies stock investors taking their life savings and putting it into these These are Ponzi schemes. They don't have small modular reactors for starters. Kazakh's foreign minister meets with Director General International. Rafael Grossi flying around the world, first class, second, when he's actually just a third class. He's living in the greatest hotels. He's eating the last of the caviars, drinking the last of the great wines. And he's going around making these deals, which gives the impression to the unsuspecting investors that the nuclear industry is moving, but it's not. It's the same gigawatts today worldwide as it was in 1995. There is no nuclear renaissance. It's highly unlikely if you look at the current reactors worldwide they're building are so far behind schedule, so far from the budget. They have a shortage of welders and manpower, precious metals. The list is very long. Why the grid relies on nuclear reactors in the winter, that's MIT, truly one of the worst humans imaginable. Well, the grid doesn't rely on nuclear. It relies on nuclear reactor because the way the grid was built was to rule out everything else. Their nuclear reactors are dependent upon 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to run them. So each reactor needs 1 million gallons, 4,500 tons each minute. That's, think about 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks going past your front door every minute. In a minute. And dumping, each of them going to dump 1,000 liters into a reactor. But actually think of it over 24 hours. You 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water dumped into a reactor in 24 hours. So it's a row of traffic right around the planet, bumper to bumper, will go through a reactor. How much power does it take to move that into a reactor in 24 hours? You need 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to it. Nuclear energy ETFs worth investing in for 2025? Of course they're not. Why would they be? With the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, the massive power demand is driving up the homeowners' bills that are gone nuts. I was watching one family today, their light and power bill went from $270 to almost $1,100 a month. And the reason is AI centers don't have the power available for them, so they're just taking it, right? The suppliers are giving it to them, and they're just jacking the prices up. And the artificial intelligence doesn't care about the price, but then the ratepayers, the homeowners, that paid for the infrastructure, right? That paid to have it replaced every few decades, right? Faithful to the users. Their bills are now skyrocketing, and these people can't even afford to pick their children up from schools anymore because AI, the industry realizes AI is the perfect tool to entrap and enslave humanity and can cause massive inflation. And in the industry worldwide, inflation is a good thing because you're more worried about trying to cover your basic living expenses than you are about the poison that they're creating, releasing into the environments. Rockefeller Foundation report funds nuclear, and Rockefeller's the very last people you would trust, finds nuclear energy could deliver up to 30% electricity generation for emerging economies. So what geothermal can do it for 90% or 100%. Why would you ever look at nuclear? McMaster University is training, that's Canada, the next generation of nuclear professionals. The next generation of nuclear assassins to the 8 million species. Right? They're all given this prestigious, look at them, all the stupid smiles on their face, as if they're actually good people. There's a long-term opportunity how the nuclear industry supports Canadian jobs, innovation, and global supply. Like, basing it up on, and this is how they're selling it as if it's a good thing because you're creating jobs. Well, geothermal and renewable energy will create a lot more jobs, bring way more stability, less pollution by many orders of magnitudes, sustainable. You're not going to be seeing a massive skyrocketing of cancers and heart problems and liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes around renewable projects. You'll see them around every nuclear power plant. You'll see an explosion within 100 miles. Deep isolation completed. We already done that one. NVIDIA CEO says nuclear is AI's future. But they're the same ones that are driving up the prices wherever they're to of energy because they're using the infrastructure created by the homeowners and by the communities. And so these people now have to pay exorbitant amount of money for their electricity because AI is imposing itself into these countries, in these cities, in these communities. Ukraine, of course, how Russia hasn't assassinated Zelensky by now is an absolute confusion for me. A bad Ukraine deal could spur nuclear proliferation. The biggest threat to humanity is nuclear fuel pools and nuclear power plants, from nuclear power plants. Because when you take some of the reactor core and put it in a fuel pool, the first time you do that, now you're releasing massive plumes into the community because that fuel is still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses. And nobody on the planet, no species, has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. You can't use nuclear weapons because you can't cash your paychecks anymore. The nuclear revival is real. No, it's not. Small modular reactor stocks flash buy signals after Department of Energy push. But we see this every 2 months, the same narrative, and written by the same kind of scum. There is no nuclear revival. And when you got to come out and tell you it's real, then it's not real. It's a pump and dump stock is what they're after, right? And then they show you these bizarre looking pictures from AI. And NuScale is different. There is no small modular reactor, so there is no nuclear renaissance. First fuel produced from molten salt reactor experiment. This is Idaho National Laboratories. The molten salt, like the sodium reactor at Santa Susana, released more radioactive materials than 3 Mile Island by an order of 460 times. It was equal to 460 3 Mile Islands melting down. But because it wasn't a commercial reactor, right, then it's not counted. That's how evil this industry actually is. So when talking about the worst nuclear meltdown in the United States, they'll often quote 3 Mile Island. But Santa Susana, in 1959, released 460 times more, and is still releasing today. The old Rocketdyne site. Technology can be deployed as soon as 2030 for both terrestrial and maritime applications. So why would you want to put floating Fukushimas out on the ocean for, with technology that's not proven? The technology that has, like the Rico Fermi plant was a sodium reactor, it melted down. Santa Susana was a sodium reactor, melted down. Los Alamos National Laboratory had a sodium reactor meltdowns. And that's not all of them by no shapes. Right? It's a technology that shouldn't exist. Project Peely progress, boiling water XT, BWXT delivers the fuel to Idaho National Laboratory. Idaho National Laboratory, this is a depiction of the truck carrying fuel. So that drove down the highway. This is absurd. This is very high level fuel. That drove down the highway. The people that are working right alongside it don't understand the enormity of where they stood up to. UK risks falling behind an AI race without urgent action on nuclear. Well, first off, right, the more, because you don't have the energy to supply AI. So, and they're building these things everywhere, and they're driving up the local and state and federal, provincial prices of energy for the people that built the infrastructure in the first place. They're showing up and robbing the communities of their freedom to live on wages. Catherine Bigelow's a house of dynamite. How come she doesn't cover nuclear fallout from the fuel pools or from nuclear accidents? How come she's looking at nuclear bombs that are not going to be used? Why is she put on a pedestal? Because that's what the industry's favorite routine is. It's disgusting. India finalizes $2 billion Russian sub-deal. Now, there's some controversy about that. There is pushback saying that's not true. And NATO loves demonizing Russia. NATO is, the proxy war we see in Ukraine is NATO. That's NATO's funding that. NATO's supplying all the weapons. NATO just came out today, the scumbag, and said they need to be able to give Ukraine at least $1 million a month from their end of the pie. So the 30 countries that are NATO shouldn't even exist. Right? NATO was created because of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed and everybody's pensions collapsed, dirty scumbags, NATO should have been dissolved. But NATO now has nuclear fighter jets, nuclear aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines. NATO is one of the biggest threats to humanity. And they're out of control. They're running a proxy war that threatens humanity and the species that Fukushima hasn't officially wiped out yet. Germany's new old nuclear dilemma. And whatever. Raphael and Mario Grossi. But what I'm trying to show you tonight is that the industry is this is just a 24-hour news cycle we're looking at. India, or the worldwide nuclear industry, is very prolific and it's very active, but it's not producing nuclear, but it's producing misery everywhere it touches down. Grossi should be in jail for the rest of his life. So should everybody on the committee of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, ERPA, or ONSCLEAR, or the IPRC. All of these people should be in jail for the rest of their lives. And most likely will be one of these days in the near future if the world ever comes to its senses. NukeNet. Swiss reactor company submits nuclear power data center proposal to U.S. Department of Energy. Like, they're always doing this, but they don't have a small modular reactor. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the supply chain. They don't have the applications into the regulatory agencies, which are typically 2 million pieces of paper. Oklo surges. Oklo doesn't have a product. I think they made, I don't know how much money Altman made off of this, but some are saying like $20 billion. And he stole off the investors who invested in a company with no stocks, with no application into the regulatory agency, no design. None of these small modular reactor companies or fusion companies have full applications into the regulatory agency. There's a few that got rubber stamped, but they're incomplete, and you can't build a reactor with an incomplete. Oklo Incorporation stocks have been trading up. They go up and down every 3 or 4 days. Boosting investor sentiments. The last company on the planet you ever want to invest in is the small modular reactor scumbag. 5 no-brainer energy stocks to buy with $1,000. So see, they consider anybody that's going to put $1,000 can afford to lose $1,000. And so you'll see that particular type of story always. At the 14 biggest financial institutions, the Conference of Parties 28, had made an agreement that we're going to support small modular reactors. We didn't know at that time what that meant. What it was the 14 biggest financial institutions on the planet, the biggest financial institutions, pension funds and everything else, are buying 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million stocks in these small modular reactor companies. So the small modular reactor company looks pretty good to the unsuspecting investor, the uninitiated investor. And so they'll take their hard-earned money and put it in these small modular reactor stocks. And 2 weeks later, they'll lose 30, 40% of their money, and they'll panic and take the rest of their money out. So if you put in $100,000, they lost $40,000, $50,000. And that's how they're floating. That's how the small modular reactor companies are staying afloat. So they have the big financial institutions starting to run, and then the stock markets are just shaking that stock because it looks good on paper. The last companies on the planet that you want to invest in. Now, like if you're ruthless, right, and you see how, what I'm telling you right now, you can take advantage of that and make money yourself for sure. Because we've been looking at this pattern for quite a few years. But now, the last couple of years in particular, we're seeing this pump and dump for what it really is. Small nuclear RNA genes. Like, if you look at all the studies on nuclear that are produced every year, several million on radioactive isotopes, several million. And it's usually 5, 10, 15, 20 academics that are making a living on those studies. So we don't know how many people are employed every year worldwide doing studies for the nuclear industry, but nuclear has been studied more than the natural elements from the solar system. Atoms for algorithms. And that's top nuclear scientist thinks AI can replace humans. Well, they're going to have to because they're stealing all their electricity, and eventually they're going to fight back. Atoms for algorithms. This industry, like, you get a man-made atom in your body, and your body will give you huge issues. It'll attack it every second for the rest of your life with white blood cells and eventually build a tumor around it. And it's very offensive to use it in that, what they're doing there. Harnessing advanced nuclear energy in action plan for states. Harnessing advanced nuclear energy. How can you harness something that doesn't exist? Wall Street Journal. Or why are they talking about something that doesn't even exist? You know, one day we might all own a unicorn because we'll be able to produce them on the drop of a hat. But right now we can't. All of us might own one of those little Jetson cars. You walk out, get in your little car and fly off to work, right? That might happen one day, but we don't have them. And the ones we do have are exorbitantly expensive, prohibitively expensive. These are all stories we're not going to get to today. I'm just going to go burp, burp. Advanced nuclear power is promising. Technology already attracting private capital, inspiring. The private capital is by deception and deceit and dishonesty. It's not by, sound investment. Inspiring new generations of engineers and developers. Like anything to do with UN, you need to run the other way immediately. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, support these hideous creatures. Modular construction system at, I think this is don't quote me. Like using modular construction system is normal. Do that all the time. But these are not small modular reactors. Nano nuclear energy, that's another one you want to stay the frig away from. Nano and new scale and ultra-safe nuclear was another one that was put on the pedestal. They don't have any product. They have some patents that they bought off somebody else to make them look legitimate to the unsuspecting investors. Stay away from. There's a small modular reactor company that has no product. Sino-French friendships drive the nuclear power low-carbon transition. Calling nuclear low-carbon is absurd. It's absurd. It needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants just to run it each day. Large ones, not small ones, but massive ones. Nuclear is all about a fuel cycle, and the fuel that comes out can be used to produce bombs. And power is a byproduct. First, for military nuclear power, trisol fuel arrives at Project Peely. This is Idaho National Laboratory. They've had quite a few meltdowns there with experimental reactors. So let's say you design a reactor, and you raise enough capital to get it to the regulatory agency. They pass the design, which is around 2 million pieces of paper, which means the Nuclear Regulatory Agency has to hire 300, 400, 500 people to go through 2 million pieces of paper for your new design, right? And then you got to get all the kinks out of it and back and forth on just the design. And then you have to build an experimental reactor to see if it actually works, and if it doesn't melt down, it doesn't blow up, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. Maybe, just maybe at that point, you can proceed to start to build a commercial reactor in that design, right? You're looking at the whole process, just the application, putting 2 million pieces of paper together. You can imagine the ordeal that's going to be. Then having a regulatory agency needs to hire hundreds and hundreds of experts and scientists and physicists and engineers, and then they need to go through all that and make sure there's no obvious flaws, et cetera, et cetera. Then you got to raise enough money then to build an experimental reactor, and this is what they're talking about here. And then you got to run that. If it's running good, then you got to run it all the way to see if it melts down, where it melts, when it melts down. And the national laboratories like Canada, United States, for instance, and every other country that's have a nuclear industry is going to see the same attributes. Britain is disgusting. The nuclear industry, the government, the universities, and the media in Britain are just atrocious, evil scum. They're atrocious. They're just insidious, monstrous scumbags. There's no exceptions either. Britain seeks new sites for large nuclear plants. Of course, Britain poisoned their entire country with wind-scale nuclear meltdown in 1957 and hid it away. They still have 8 million liters a day from a nuclear meltdown at a breeder reactor, reactor number 4 at Windscale, which is now called Sellafield, because they went out with guns to the theaters and kidnapped people out of the back rows of theaters in 1957 to go into the nuclear meltdown to push the rods out of the reactor. Like, the stories are so crazy. When you look at the nuclear industry, and there's no accountability, there's no checks and balances, right? It's one big family of scumbags. Wind, water, and solar energy aren't enough, so California needs nuclear. What about geothermal? Right? You know, if you put your wind, say you got your coastline, you got 100 communities, and say a 500-mile stretch of the coastline. The wind might not blow in 1 or 2 communities, but it's blowing in the other 95, 96 communities. And because of Nikola Tesla, we can transport electricity very long distances. And so when you come out and say that nuclear is the only option, then you have to ask the question is, well, how the hell did we make it here when we only have a fraction of our energy worldwide is nuclear? A solid-state quantum processor based on nuclear spins. And physics.org, the lies they've told about Fukushima is absurd. Talk about nuclear spins. U.S. private fusion energy company, TAE Technologies, UK. Anything to do with the UK is as corrupt as it'll ever be. It can't get any more corrupt. The minute you put United Kingdom academics and scientists into that equation, you're talking about serious corruption and contempt for everybody in the old species. Have announced a bilateral reciprocal investment commitment to commercialize the particle accelerator technology for the global market. I can't remember, was that going to be used to make isotopes to murder people in hospitals? Was that the technology we're talking about? We cover so much, sometimes I can't. Fusion doesn't exist, by the way. A billion units being shut down for decommissioning. And look at the trees covered nice. In Russia are all to be permanently shut down by the end of the year. It's 3 operable units, the nuclear power plant in Russia are all to be shut down. Wow. Awesome. There's 3 more little disease factories gone off, massive disease factories gone off our planet. Invade Iran or accept talks, ex-Israeli Air Force chief warns. All they care about is war. They don't care about anything. At one point, not that long ago, they were the 4th biggest weapons producer on the planet, but they're just this little tiny country. And everybody has to participate in the military, so it's a very questionable and a legacy of just nothing but crimes against humanity. Underground nuclear reactor construction to begin in Parsons. And look where they're building it, right in all the prime farmland, surrounded by prime farmland. All nuclear plants, except for a couple, have this look like this. Because they can't contain the emissions after they take the fuel. And Deep Fission, we talked about that company almost at the beginning of the show. This was their sister, where they were going to have deep geological repositories, like a mile underground, in just a tunnel, not a tunnel, but a hole. Right? They took up that 3-year experiment where they had a canister. That's the same company. Deep Fission, a company that makes small advanced nuclear reactors, which they don't, and they don't have one, they don't have an application into the regulatory agency, is going to build a test version of its new underground reactor. Well, they don't make small modular advanced nuclear reactors. right? And what they're going to do is if I remember correctly, is they're going to drill a hole in the ground, they're going to stuff the fuel down there and let the chain reaction happen a mile down. And if it goes south, they're just going to fill it up with cement and that. And when it's time to decommission, you can't bring it back up from a mile down, so they're just going to plug up the hole. This is evil stuff. The industry, the more evil you are, the more money the industry throws at them. The more likely you are to poison the water tables, the food sources, the farmlands. And they chose the most farmland-intensive area in that part of the country. And you can't contain the emissions on top of that. Belgium Dole 2 is closed. So, and we showed pictures of that earlier in the week. Surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. All your fresh water. Langjiang, Chinese simulator ready for delivery. Look at them, they're all so proud of themselves. We're better than everybody. We're with nuclear, so we're better than everybody. Aikido governor inspects the Tomari nuclear power plant. The Aikido, they had a landslide, they had an earthquake there in 2018, was it? Something like that. So let me bring up that one picture. So I should do more than that, but we don't have time. We're not going to get through what we got. Right now, we're just going through the stories we can't get to tonight. Just to give you an insight of how mad it is to do what I'm doing all the time. There we go, Aikido earthquake. It was a 9.5 earthquake. They said it was a 6. Said it was a 6.7 and a maximum scale of 7 on the Shindu scale, which is 7. So they're very sneaky, see, because most people don't understand how to interpret that, right? But look at the damage. What I want you to see is just this one picture of mountains. The payloads were lost on all sides of the mountains. But the original came out as a magnitude 6 earthquake. Well, magnitude 6 earthquakes don't have that particular attribute to it. Like, it was really something. All of these landslides, which are the mountains losing their payloads, the entire mountain, not landslides like a part of the mountain. This was the mountains losing their entire shapes. I've never seen anything like it. And there's a nuclear plant not very far from that. Let me show you where the earthquake was on land, clearly. Oh, don't matter. Let's keep going. We just got too much to get through. Yeah, and Chicken X stands up and says, we're better than everybody and nobody else matters, only what nuclear wants. Kansas, well, nuclear is just, it doesn't care about anybody. It don't care about themselves. But it certainly don't like humans. It don't like insects. It don't like birds. It attacks everything with replicating cells. And the world needs to wake the frig up and smarten up. Kansas will get the world's first mile-deep nuclear reactor. Groundbreaking is next week. See, this is absurdness. They're going to put a reactor a mile deep in the ground, deep fission. It's not your conventional reactor, and you can't recover it, and you can't fix it if it melts down. All you can do is now remember the reactor doesn't need oxygen, so if they have a nuclear meltdown, it'll burn for infinity, and it'll destroy your water tables and everything else. And if you water ingresses into it, it'll split the earth open. It don't matter that it's a mile down. It's absurd that anybody would do this. It's absurd. It's not their planet to destroy, and that's what they're doing. They're destroying it. It's because it doesn't go away for billions of years and attacks everything with replicating cells. It's part of a national push for new nuclear energy generation. Like, it's desperation. And personally, I doubt if it'll ever come to fruition. They'll get the money, they'll dig holes, but there's no way they'll start a chain reaction. ESCOM, which is South Africa, seeks EIA for a third nuclear power plant. So nuclear will get its way. Better know a non-nuke, Germany. Nuclear weapons shaped NATO's strategy. NATO is your enemy. They're not supposed to exist. United States, and how can they look anybody in the eye, right? When they got their wish, like they were at war against the Soviet Union, which was more advanced, right? And so all these countries got together. Now there's a total of 30, I guess, or 31. If you look up NATO, it says 31 militaries. That's what it says on their site. What are they trying to project with that, I wonder? United States Department of Energy small modular reactor funding for Palestine. That what they're talking about there is a boiling water reactor X300, which is 240-foot skyscraper. Half of it will be underground. It's not a small modular reactor. And you're talking about Chris Singh, and this is an artist. It'll look nothing like that because it's a 240-foot tall buildings. So when you show you something like this, when it's actually a skyscraper, and they know the difference, they're well. And I'll show you that if we ever get to it. I've got to keep moving here because we got to get through. We're trying to get through the stories that I'm not going to cover tonight. If that makes any sense. Nothing makes sense. You come to my shows, nothing makes sense anyway. I'm just this little voice in the dark, and the industry is full steam ahead turning my lights off on me. Proposal for ratepayers to subsidize nuclear development gets a cold reception. Proposal for the ratepayers to pay for nuclear. So they want to put the price of new nuclear on your light and power bills for mom and pa kettle, and that comes after now because the prices of their electricity are skyrocketing worldwide because of AI showing up in their cities, communities, their countries, their provinces, and they can afford the expensive electricity, right? Because by them stealing it, the price goes up, and then the price goes up, of course, for everybody. So it's nothing but a curse, and then it's going to be used to try to bully humanity and track, trace database and manage everybody. Turkey drone magnet Baykar enters a small reactor nuclear race. Well, the nuclear race has been going on for over 50 years. Those connotations are meant to get investors involved. Degenerate, look, he shows up everywhere. And everywhere he goes, evil follows. Department of Energy selects TVA and Holtec for small modular reactor, $400 million each. Chris Singh, one of the lowest forms of life imaginable. Algeria faces renewed calls to clean up nuclear test sites over environmental dangers. This was the French government on their nuclear test in Algeria, right? And they didn't clean it up. They wouldn't even tell the Algerians where it's to. Algerians didn't develop nuclear. It was the French. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory holds nuclear weapons stress test. Nuclear weapons stress test. To have endless amount of money for anything nuclear. But anything for hospitals or schools or infrastructure or veterans or the pensioners or anything else, they get sick and drop dead, just drop dead. Shut up, live your life and shut up. We need all the resources, all the precious metals for the nuclear industry and nuclear weapons and nuclear fantasies. The nuclear revival is not real, for goodness sakes. Small modular reactor stocks flash buy signals. No, they don't. There is no small modular reactors. Entergy files to extend time in service for Arkansas's Nuclear One. Entergy, they'll get whatever they want. 40-year operation. They get granted a 40-year operational license with a 20-year renewal. It'll operate until 2054 and 2058. These are very brittle. The problem with nuclear is the neutron bombardment makes these high-pressure facilities brittle, and we're talking 1,000, 2,000 pounds per square inch reactors. So when they get brittle, and you're talking about these enormous stresses, Summit to tell a story beyond the deal to restart South Carolina's failed nuclear reactors. Everything nuclear is put on a pedestal. They're given the full royal treatment. All the media runs out and fawns over them. They're given all these awards to each other. But there is no nuclear renaissance. U.S. looks to boost uranium reserves for nuclear power. Lee discusses defense nuclear energy cooperation with Romania presidents over the phone. So why is that so the president of this country, South Korea, who's another one who should be in jail, is talking to another president on the phone, and that's worthy of a news story that is going to be used to convince unsuspecting investors to invest in a nuclear technology that doesn't even exist. That's all it's being used for. Look, the nuclear weapons site received $5 million for continued cleanup, which is nothing. It's nothing for what they need. They need billions. It's poisoning everybody for 60 or 70 years. Yeah, well, we're going to throw a few million at it. Shut up, slave. Surrounded by farms. And then United States Army Corps of Engineers. They're the last people I would put in charge of anything, particularly nuclear. Nuclear 2025 conference, Energy Secretary's speech. Oh yeah, no, they can't do anything wrong. They can kill everything on the planet, but they couldn't do anything wrong. They'll get awards and medals. They'll get invited to join the International Atomic Energy Agency if you're extra evil. Trump fired him because he was a piece of shit. Now he will help New York, PA expand New York nuclear reactor fleet. New York doesn't have a reactor fleet, for starters. They hired a former chairman of the Regulatory Commission so he can get through the red tape. Because and Hansen, of course, Christopher Hansen is not some genius. He's a scumbag who got the job because he's a scumbag. What if rockets use nuclear propulsion? How fast could we reach Mars? Who gives a shit? Why should anybody care? What do you got to go to Mars for? You can't live there. You can't do anything productive there. You know, benefit to all the precious resources and metals and materials. And if you blow it up on the way up, you poison everybody on the planet with the fallout. You're scum. That's who you are in reality, and you know it. That's why your professor got you that job. Terrestrial Energy, IMSR Project Tetra, moves closer to commercialized molten salt reactors. Is that Gates' little sweet deal? Like the people who gave him the go-ahead, Terrestrial Energy, I got news bloops about them coming up. They got here, yeah, okay, there you go. Have a nice day. Here's your license. Top 7, but they're not going to produce anything. If they do produce it, I'll be shocked. If any of them produce anything. After all this time, 50 years, you still haven't managed to produce anything. You have 100 new companies. They haven't produced anything. They're not trying. They're just trying to loot the investors. Because renewables, in another 2 or 3 years, so if you take a 5 or 6 year period starting in 2023 to 2028, there'll be an increase of renewables that is greater than the current capacity of all gas, all coal, nuclear combined in gigawatts will be produced in just a 5 year period. That technology is going to accelerate. That type of technology is accelerating every year. So the nuclear is just coming here trying to loot everything before the world realizes they're obsolete. And they shouldn't exist because there's nobody on the planet with an autoimmune trigger who can defend against the emissions from these disease factories. Top 7 things about India-Russia nuclear submarine agreement is there is no agreement, allegedly. But there's a lot of media out there running this story because NATO likes that, see? Oregon's new scale, power rides roller coaster of shifting investor sentiment. Yeah, you don't have a product. You have an incomplete license into the regulatory agency. You don't have the engineers to finish the application. You don't have land to build something on. You don't have the funds to do it. You're putting out more than you're taking in, so to speak. And then if it wasn't for the 14th biggest financial institution putting you on a pedestal by a Ponzi scheme of buying your stocks and hanging on to them for a couple of weeks and then selling them to steal the investors' shares, I think that's basically, they're like ultra-safe nuclear doing the same scam, which eventually went out of business, not before they all made themselves tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Nuclear 2025 conference. Energy Secretary speaks. So just because you got Miliband in the United Kingdom or this one or that one, that it promote nuclear, that doesn't mean that, and this is UK government site, that doesn't mean anything. And look at this creep. That's a creep. When you look at that guy, you're like, that's a creep. Because of the job he got, not because of his looks per se, but terrestrial energy moves closer to commercial. No, it doesn't. Like, that's meant to get the unsuspecting to investors to invest in an industry that has no I don't know, right? Just keep her trying to roll anyway. But that's not a deal that I know about. India gives an update on growing nuclear missile submarine force. I don't know if that's real or not. So my understanding is that's not real. That doesn't mean it isn't, or it is. It's just my understanding is currently, as of today. That could change tomorrow or next day. AI energy crunch demand urgent nuclear reform. So they're not going to stop building the data centers. So everybody's latent power bills each month are going to go up a little bit more. All right? They don't have a pipeline of the magic small modular reactors or the fusion reactors or anything else. Large conventional reactors are just ridiculously prohibitively expensive. We can only build an AI economy of tomorrow with rapid, expedited deployment of clean, reliable, sovereign nuclear power. We can only build the AI economy of tomorrow. And this is the Nuclear Industries Association, Tom Shitrix. With rapid, expedited deployment of clean, reliable, sovereign nuclear power. You don't have the designs, you don't have the supply chain, you don't have the welders, you don't have... There's 1 million companies necessary to build a big reactor on top of that. You don't have that anymore. Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station is testing its 70 sirens on Thursday. So all the children will have nightmares for at least a month. The sirens are meant to make you complacent. If you can hear the siren, you're in a nuclear wasteland because the fuel pools can't be contained at these sites. So you are being poisoned, your children, your loved ones, your friends, your families, your communities, your pets, the animals, the insects, the biota. Mini Chernobyl, a secret Russian Navy nuclear submarine meltdown, Moscow tried to bury. For the most part, they did. And to show you the dumbest thing on the planet is a nuclear submarine. It's the dumbest thing out there. You can't use your weapons, and you're polluting the planet. They have exemptions for regulatory agencies, not that their regulatory agencies are holding anybody accountable. And so they're allowed to dump a lot of nuclear into the ocean because they're a military submarine. And who's going to check them? Who's going to know the difference? There's no incentive to hold them accountable. They can only exist by being evil. Months before Chernobyl, Soviet Navy suffered a major nuclear disaster with the Echo 2 submarine K 431 blew its reactor during a routine refueling. So this is an interesting story most people probably never heard before. Mishandled reactor lid triggered a prompt criticality, killing nearly a dozen sailors, irradiating hundreds more, who probably died within a year or less, as radioactive debris showered nearby ships and shorelines. That's a terrible story right there. Moscow hid the accident, kept the locals in the dark, and botched the cleanup, leaving contaminated sediments, leaking waste sites, and long-term radiation exposures for some 30,000 nearby residents. And decades later, well, this stuff goes worldwide, by the way. It doesn't just, it's not localized. It is localized, but it covers the whole planet too. Decades later, K-431 remains a symbol of the Soviet nuclear negligence and a largely unstudied public health crisis. Yeah, that's an interesting, very few stories we see where they acknowledge. But decades later, hundreds and perhaps thousands of nearby residents have suffered from radiation exposures caused by incomplete cleanup efforts. They weren't even efforts. They were just symbiotic. They went out there with paper towels. The Soviet Union, the center to homeless, no doubt, was one of the more significant nuclear submarine incidences of the 80s. And there was a lot. There was a lot of these. These are not accidents. These were guaranteed to happen at some point. The hell did I get that there? Hang on 1 second for me. Let me go back to that. I'll put that on the screen for a second. I just want to grab that whole story that I got there and put it in a separate folder so I can find it later. Because you know me, to me that's a perfect little weapon right there. Stories like that are very useful to people that need a weapon to beat the shit out of the nuclear industry. There we go. Post. There we go. We're back on schedule. Let's keep going. It's crazy stuff. That's crazy stories, see? And there's so much that had happened that the Soviet and the Russians' Navy nuclear submarine fleet, there's a whole bunch of weird, like they were unloading their fuel in Riva Bay or something. I can't remember how to pronounce it in Soviet or Russian language, but they had abandoned the fuel in outdoor fuel pools for decades. You know, and the result of a lot of their materials is known as Mayak and the Tetra River disasters, etc., etc. Turkey's defense giant Baykar reportedly enters nuclear sector with a 40-megawatt small modular reactor project. As far as I know, they don't have an application into the regulatory agencies for the licenses. So they're just a fake actor, right? That's who these people are. Japan edges closer to restarting the world's biggest nuclear power plant, which is on a fault line, which is on a new fault line. Just hang on. I was like, I'm not going to get to these stories. I can't cover everything. Is it there? Here. Yeah, right here. Let me show you something. So on January 1st, 2024, last year, the Niigata, there was 6,700 homes and businesses that were significantly either destroyed or impacted by liquefaction from a earthquake. You see the dotted line over there? Well, the first arrow closest to me is the Niigata nuclear power plant. That's what they're talking about in that story. And the other red arrow over there is the Shika nuclear power plant. They had a tsunami. The earth was lifted up 13 feet for about up to a mile offshore in some places, and there was 6 harbors dried up. The dotted line is the Eurasian plate and North American tectonic plates, and that's where they crashed to. That's been dormant for almost 4,000 years. That was active, and so the Noto Peninsula, where you see the epicenter to that whole peninsula, is known as the Noto Peninsula, Ishikawa Prefecture, had over 1,500 landslides, 1,500 aftershocks. And I've done a presentation on that last week or the week before, like not a full one, right? But it'll get you back up to, that was a significant, the Shika nuclear power plant, we still don't have, they acknowledged that there was an earthquake in the basement on the Shindu scale of 7, was a 7, which meant it was equal to a 10 on the international scale. Shindu scale, you got to multiply it by 1.428, right, to be able to conflate it equal to the Richter scale. You should be opening that, please. I noticed I got 5 thumbs down on my video last night. That was a pretty good video, I thought. Which means it must have been really good if I got 5 thumbs down. No one pays attention to me anymore. So getting 5 thumbs down meant I definitely struck a nerve. EDF, which is the French government itself, secured a 12-year nuclear power contract with battery manufacturers. Because they don't want to use like geothermal batteries. They don't want to use geothermal energy. They don't want to use anything geothermal because then you don't need small modular reactors no more. Anything a small modular reactor might do in the future sometime, a geothermal could do it right now. And like they're throwing $400 million at the Palisade plant, or another 400 at TVA, $400 million. And I think they donated this year or gave $6 million to geothermal. But that was just 2 sites of nuclear. Like they give, nuclear gets whatever it wants as much as it needs, and then they're investing just, I don't know how many billions worldwide in fusion and small modular reactors. They're not spending anything on geothermal because geothermal will work. You don't need storage. It doesn't care about wind or solar. It's geothermal, right? And it's everywhere. And quasi-electric technology makes it, you can use it anywhere on the planet. You can drill deep enough to hit the temperatures that will be hotter than gas, oil, coal, or nuclear. And so you can produce heat or energy much better for a fraction and right away. How the U.S. bomber pilots reacted to the historical strike on Iran's nuclear sites. It's just another day for these guys. President Lee lays out to South Korea plans for a nuclear-free Korea Peninsula. Will North Korea buy it? Well, I mean, like, you know, what United Nations done to North Korea and the so-called coalition and the police action is unconscionable. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. And they call it a police action. That was United Nations done that. Their first act after changing their name from League of Nations to United Nations, which was a takeover. The United Nations is the takeover of your planet. They're the fictional New World Order. They're the takeover of your planet. Of all your water, all your precious resources, all your freedoms have been sliced away from you, yanked out of your grasp by entity known as the United Nations, which is not united. It's united in evil and misery and enslavement. They're the Achilles heel of every species on the planet. You know, North Korea was occupied by Japan for 50 years, and they finally got their freedom, and they had to fight for it, and because South Korea didn't want them to be free. And so then the United Nations came in, stomped them, burnt the whole country to the ground with napalm, burnt down every city, every community, every town with napalm. And millions of people still suffered are affected by what they've done. They used more weapons than they used in World War II. United Nations did. And never been held accountable for these crimes against humanity. And so for 70 plus years, they've been ostracized on top of the 50 years that they were occupied and ostracized. There's 120 years ostracized. And then now they're used as the boogeyman because they want to be free, because they want to join the rest of the world. They haven't attacked anybody. If you look at who Britain's been attacking to, who France has been attacking in all this time, who United Nations has attacked and destroyed in all this time. If you look at the United States and everybody else, Canada included, have attacked, North Korea never attacked anybody. They just don't want to give up their sovereignty or their freedom or their minerals or their water. And that's what the globalist United Nations want. They're fucking scum. A possible role for the international banking institution in commercial nuclear projects. Well, there already is. They're looting all the pension funds to support the small modular reactors and the fusion reactors. There's, like I said earlier, the 14 biggest financial institutions on the planet are hoodwinking the population into buying stocks by artificially inflating the stocks of fusion and small modular reactor companies that normally could never exist because they have no product. Duke Energy applauds Department of Energy's new nuclear investment helps advance deployment of small modular reactors in the United States. This is simply meant to lull people into complacency in buying stocks for companies that don't have a product. And by the time they figures it out, they'll lose 20-30% of their investment. Deep Fission announces Parsons, Kansas, as a site for underground nuclear reactor pilot project. I showed you the pictures earlier from the satellite. It's farmland as far as you can see. Why is it always that way? Because they can't contain the emissions. And so they poison you in the supermarkets and the restaurants when you're on vacation. Many Americans worry used and a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the food grown around nuclear plants is on the big Carnival cruises and the Disney cruise ships, where they got 4,000 or 5,000 people on these cruise ships. A lot of that is GMO too, on top of that. But a lot of it's from the nuclear sites. So they love destroying the wealthy that can afford to go do stuff like that, destroy their health. Because the nuclear industry, all of them are buying shares in pharmaceutical companies because they know what they're doing through all the firms. Right? All nuclear plants are surrounded by firms. They're evil. It's evil. Many Americans worried the United States is heading for nuclear war in the next decade. Yeah, but you're already at nuclear war. The radioactive fallout from the nuclear power plants, there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide destroying your air, your land, your water, your birds, your insects, and everything. There's 1,000 fuel pools full of decades of reactor cores still splitting atoms. Instead of splitting it for millions of homes and businesses, it's just releasing it directly into the air all day long. You can't contain it. It's a catastrophic emergency to deal with it, and we won't even acknowledge it. And it's by design. Nuclear energy can help cut power costs in emerging markets. This is absolutely madness to even suggest it. It's the most resource-intensive energy in human history, on top of that. One-man nuclear command, of course. One guy on the button. What could possibly go wrong? Messina, which is New York, officials submitting applications to site a nuclear facility locally. And because there's not very many effective anti-nuclear. I don't know if there's such a thing as an anti-nuclear lobbying group on the planet, is there? I don't think there really is, like an actual real one. Not one created by the industry. We know there's a few out there. Right, Arnie Gunnarsson, Beyond Nuclear. There's quite a few of them. But these are the industries entities, right, that are meant to look like anti-nuclear, but are actually seated with the industry itself. Local officials plan, like the NRC is. Local officials plan to submit an application to the New York Power Authority to site a nuclear facility in Messina. I forgot to look it up on a map. I apologize. Terra Power passes final safety evaluation for a permit. Look at this stupid looking building. This is the rendition of the Natrium. Actually, James put out, let me find that. He put out, man, just an amazing little blurb there last night. I had to watch it a couple times today. I'm going to play it for you. It's only a short video, but it's really good. And it's about the Natrium small modular reactor fantasy. I can't possibly do a good job. So I'm going to play it. I really enjoy it. It's not like a song per se. It's a throwback video. It's like a 50s or 60s or something, but it's pretty, it's got some funny shit in there. Let's play it for a bit of fun. A little intermission, so to speak, for the show here tonight. We're still going strong. Let's get it all. I'll be right back after this. Oh, guess I got to turn my audio on first, Dana. I know. I'll be right back after. This is worth your time. Watch this. This is great. This is the Natrium and small modular reactor fantasies. It takes it to a whole new level. Here we go.
Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to your Department of Energy. Today's DOE is nothing like your granddad's Atomic Energy Commission. No, sir, we're faster, flashier, and far more enthusiastic about nuclear technology that's still being figured out today. Let's begin with our proud new invention, the Small Modular Reactor, or SMR, a compact atomic achiever designed to fit almost anywhere a good idea might go. And look over here, the Natrium Fast Reactor, a shining sodium-powered friend of the future. Liquid metal circulates through its channels, staying wonderfully steady, provided nobody introduces air or water at the wrong time. But don't you worry, our engineers have thought of nearly everything. Now feast your eyes on the molten salt storage tank. It collects excess heat and sends it back out when the grid needs a little oomph. 5 full hours of bonus power, just enough time for America to feel confident before switching back to something else. Thanks to our accelerated DOE NRC review pathway, reactor designs glide through licensing in a brisk 18 months. Is every detail perfect? Well, the future is full of surprises. That's what makes progress so delightful. And look at this cheerful supply chain. Each SMR is built from handy modules crafted in factories across the country, loaded onto rail cars and assembled like a patriotic set of model rockets. Efficiency has never felt so hopeful. Over here we see tomorrow's data centers, rows and rows of thinking machines needing more electricity than entire cities. Fortunately, our SMRs stand ready to provide dependable power for the digital dreams of a growing nation. Natrium even features passive safety behavior, meaning the system gracefully adjusts itself when temperatures drift upward, a gentle reminder that in atomic engineering, self-control is a virtue. Now, some folks ask about cost. We simply remind them that innovation pays dividends down the line, and the line stretches as far as imagination permits. So join us, bright learners, as the DOE marches proudly into a radiant horizon.
With SMRs, natrium, and a healthy dose of optimism, America's atomic future is assured.
Just as soon as we finish building it.
That's so cool, man. I love it. Let me get set up here again. What am I doing wrong? Oh, okay, let's keep going. A rendering of the natriums. I think that video we just watched does a better job. How do you beat that? That's only got 24 views after 24 hours. Most of them were probably me. It's absurd though, isn't it? Let's keep it rolling here. India can meet 28% of power demand with next generation nuclear. Well, next generation nuclear doesn't exist. And it's not likely to exist. In order for it to exist, on top of that, they're going to have to use a couple of pretty insidious tricks like plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is just hideously crimes against humanity from the emissions. Nuclear energy market grows. The market grows, but there's no product. The investors artificially inflating that stuff. We shouldn't be afraid of Putin's nuclear weapons. No. NATO shouldn't be over there inflaming that. And they've driven up the price of commodities worldwide. Skepticism surrounds Tennessee's Small Modular Reactors Awards. Skepticism. Small Modular Reactor Award. They don't have a product. They're not going to be building it. Skepticism is the right words to be used. The next nuclear submarine superpower. Japan. Really? Japan. Who contaminated our entire planet? They're going to put them out on the ocean with a nuclear weapon. Do you really think that's a very productive thing to be doing? Senator John Kane introduces resolution recognizing December the 2nd as the World Nuclear Energy Day. We covered that earlier the week here on the 2nd. We came out. They weren't very happy with me over that one. Excuse me. I'll give it back to the poll here, actually. Did the nuclear industry with malice poison the Great Lakes for 80 years and millions of people and thousands of farms? Let's cover that for a little bit after this story right there. Let's stop right there. Just give me a second. I'll go grab. Here we go. Great Lakes. So they poisoned who knows how many tens of millions of people, and then the food sources which were distributed worldwide. That's where they're going to put the Palisades and Lake Michigan. They want to put a new reactors there on top of that. Reopen the one they got there. That's been closed since 2022. When you look at this map of the Great Lakes, Lake Superior has no reactors on it, and it's on a higher elevation, right? These are on lower elevations. So they were counting on radiation not migrating to Lake Superior because I guess they wanted that clean source or something. This is the third biggest aquifer on the planet. So you see operating power reactors in red and closed nuclear power reactors is so similar you can't tell the difference in the colors. So when you're looking at the big picture, it's hard to know right off the point which one, because you could have picked another color. You didn't have to have both of those in red. Why would they do that, see? I mean, that's obviously something you shouldn't do. But maybe there's another reason that I'm not taking into consideration is that closed nuclear power plants don't mean they're not emission free or something, right? Because a lot of the cast are vented, the majority of the cast are vented, and these closed nuclear plants might have fuel pools that are stuffed for decades or more later. So yeah, they should be included in the same color, I would imagine, right? It's really shocking because the Great Lakes are millions of people. Michigan, Wisconsin, Chicago, there's just Canada. There's so much going on here. Then there's a massive amount of farms in these areas. These are huge. It's the third biggest aquifer of fresh water on the entire planet. It was originally produced 1990-91. It was updated in 2013 and funded by the Citizens Clearinghouse and Waste Management and Great Lakes United. And then even the Deep Geological Repositories and incinerators, nuclear incinerators. are included, which is disgusting. And it's well known that you use incinerators today. Every nuclear power plant, by the way, has its own incinerator, whereas legally, Western Waste Management Facility, proposed Deep Geological Repository on the Great Lakes. So they purposely poisoned the Great Lakes. And one can only assume, and this was Ontario provincial government's proposed nuclear waste dump to the top Lake Superior, Thunder Bay, but they actually picked out, what was it, this was a 2014 model, but now they got Ignace, and we have stories about that tonight that we might not get to, or we might, we'll see. We're still trying to run through these. I'm ran into the ground. It's been a long week, so I'm not sure how far I'll make it. I'll do the best I can. Get a couple days off and rejuvenate. We'll come back swinging again. Top companies in the nuclear medicine market. The nuclear medicine is a genocide machine. When you inject radiation into a person, first thing happens to them is they lose all their cells. All their cells die. All their hair falls out. And they're hoping that technique will deal with cancer. But cancer is typically caused by 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry, from nuclear power, the nuclear dumping, the nuclear cycle. The cancer epidemic started in the early 70s after all that nuclear testing got underway, where they released radiation into the environment worldwide. And that was when we see the decline of all the species worldwide. States urges the Supreme Court to review nuclear fuel storage case. These are all stories we're not going to get to tonight. We've been at it for an hour and 30 minutes. We're still not through the story. These are all today's stories that we're not going to get through. We can't cover these stories because there's just too many every day. Guyana targets nuclear energy to boost electricity output and exports. They don't have any clean water for the country. Right, the garbage in the communities is absurd, on the roads and the sides of the roads and the water and the rivers and the lakes. It's absurd, the garbage in these countries. And the impoverishment of the people in these communities is already almost as bad as it can get. And so to take the little bit of resources and put it into nuclear, it's just evil. It's UN, right? That's UN's agenda. They love it. You see Raphael Grossi's always got a big smile on his face. Like he knows what he's doing is evil. And that's why he got the job, is because he can smile through. American nuclear fuel deal with Seoul threatens to raise tensions on the North Korea peninsula. But they're always doing this posturing. Like North Korea hasn't attacked anybody in 70 years. Russia starts, and South Korea takes great pride in ostracizing them from the rest of the world. Right, so because you have so much corruption for that to be able to happen, then you have to keep the corruption the whole time. Then that becomes the norm. That's the norm now all around the world. We accept the world. We accept that corruption when we have constitutions and Bill of Rights and Magna Cartas that clearly state is not acceptable, and that we were supposed to have checks and balances, and we abrogated that responsibility, not willingly, but through the mass media, the mass TV, the mass radio, the mass propaganda in your universities and your schools, and all the way, children are, the last number of years, have been grown up watching SpongeBob. They'll tear your head off if you don't let them watch it. They'll graduate at the same time they're doing Spider-Man and the Hulk, which are the industry's indoctrination machines. And they're vicious. SpongeBob is about the Marshall Islands, where there's currently over 1 million square kilometers uninhabitable because of radioactive fallout. That was a 2019 study, I believe it was. And then, there's all kinds of other nuclear connotations out there. Every superhero now is kind of conflated with something nuclear, some nuclear attribute. And SpongeBob is meant to attack the most vulnerable of children, right? The very youngest of children. It's on purpose. It's targeting them. And then I can't remember how much money they sold in merchandise. It was a couple of years back we had seen the numbers. We covered it here. It was absurd how much money they were taking in just on merchandise that children desperately wanted mommy and daddy to buy for them. And then they'll graduate up to The Simpsons. By then they're going to college and they're still watching The Simpsons, where it starts off with Homer Simpson, right, leaving work, and he's got a fuel, as if he's picking up a fuel with a set of tongs. You can't do that. A fuel rod with tongs, it doesn't work that way. And then it bounces, ends up in his hood. And he drives on home, he's got it in his hood. Like, his organs will melt in just a few minutes in that proximity. Right, he'll become incapacitated pretty quickly, but his organs will actually liquefy. So children grow up disconnected from reality because that's what those cartoons were meant to do. That's what those fictional superheroes, which displaces moms and dads and aunts and uncles and grandparents and brothers and sisters and family, and replaces them with somebody with a cape on that is pro-nuclear in every sense of the word. I don't understand how it's acceptable. I can't comprehend how the industry can play their part and feel good about themselves. North Korea likely ready to carry out major nuclear tests as soon as Kim gives the order, says South Spies. Of course he is. What options do they have? They've been ostracized for 120 years. And then demonized every day worldwide in endless amounts of media, with no hope of anything different ever coming about. Anybody shows any kind of sympathy for North Korea are immediately set upon by the hateful scum public relation firms we have worldwide for the military-industrial complex. They need a boogeyman, right? And then it doesn't care that it's millions of people are victimized. That's how the game works for them. And that's how they keep everybody asleep and keep everybody complacent and on their side instead of critical thinking skills. U.S. nuclear bomber fleet receives major boost. Of course they do. Whatever nuclear wants, it gets. And it'll always get much more than it can ever use. And so the majority of the money, like for nuclear cleanup, it's important to realize that the majority of the money is stolen. About 90% or better of the money allocated for mitigation and cleanup of nuclear dumps and sites is stolen through administration, because that's why it's never cleaned up. And that's why you always got to throw money at them. And we're talking from small to big. You see that particular attribute. It's shocking. International Congress on Nuclear Medicine. Nuclear medicine is an extermination machine in millions of hospitals worldwide. That's what it is. We've done presentations on radiation therapy. If you watch that stuff, you'll never, ever, ever, ever allow radiation therapy to happen to you. It destroys everything in your body. Yeah, it might get rid of the tumor, but now you got 65 more. And you destroyed all your organs. Resident encourages Congresswoman Clark to sponsor nuclear disarmament resolution. Residents. See, they'll get put on a pedestal. They're shoved up in the media. We see that constantly. But if you're worried about the fuel pool splitting atoms into the farms and eating the food there, good luck, buddy, because everything you got will be censored forever and ever and ever. KenGen selected operator of Kenya's first nuclear power plant. Kenya doesn't have a nuclear power plant. But apparently they're going to, because evil is very clearly now identifiable as called the pro-nuclear community, and they're prolific worldwide. Putin revokes Russia's ratification of nuclear test ban treaty. Of course. You got Russia and North Korea and China on one side, and then you got Britain, never be great again, France, United States, Australia, Canada on the other side. And then you have, in the Asian community, because there's 6 billion Asians on the planet, you have South Korea, Taiwan, China, Japan, and they influence their propaganda arms, which are huge tentacles, reach into the 6 billion Asian community. And this is all coordinated through UN, right? The different fractions of UN, which is a military-industrial complex, right? Even Eisenhower acknowledged that. Nuclear is coming back to Angeles, which is United Kingdom, Scotland, Ireland or something, have small modular reactors and Wi-Fi, could decarbonize Wales. It's like when you hear decarbonize a country or cities and stuff like this is the nuclear industry's narrative, right? Like carbon footprint was a paper by BP Oil, a public relations firm. Net zero was a paper by Miles Allen, who got a cushy job at Cambridge as an assistant professor. And global warming was a paper by Wallace Brocker. And then climate change was a paper by James Hansen. So those 4 papers were snatched up by the United Nations and has been used to bludgeon humanity with. And I mean bludgeon them too. Every day, 24 hours a day. And those narratives have none of them papers have been peer reviewed. I know, rambling of an old man. I get it. IKEA is a flaw. It's a flaw. Rosatom introduces 3D printing technology for nuclear equipment production because they don't have supply chains, see? So this kind of technology is untested. It's never been exposed to significant neutron bombardment, the embrittlement of this kind of technology because it's made at such high temperatures is already suspect, right? Look at that carbon-free site. It's the biggest construction site on the entire planet, and the media's out there calling it carbon-free. And they don't explain how it can be carbon-free. Nuclear regulator raises fire safety concerns over Hinkley Point. This was an interesting. First off, we talk about this quite a lot. This stupid idiot. This site is infested with rats. It's infested. It's infested. They're literally, figuratively, everywhere you can conceive. Rats. Big rats. And so they'll chew the shit out of the infrastructure, the wires, the insulation, etc., etc. And a lot of that stuff is buried in cement. And so there's no way they can rip it out to get at it to repair it. And we were talking about hundreds of thousands of miles of cables in a place that's absurdly infested with rats. And this is why you see in that particular, like, I'd like to see the power bill for that place for one day or 1 year. This is only a fraction of the site. Look at all the cranes. I've never seen anything like it. The amount of energy, they have 2 dedicated, this one probably has 3, 2 dedicated massive gas, oil, and coal plants that will run the pumps, will run that entire site. A nuclear site can't run on its own power. Got to keep going here. We're never going to get through this. A fire enforcement notice has been served to a civil engineering firm after significant fire safety shortfalls were identified at the most expensive nuclear construction site that happens to be nuclear on the entire planet in Somerset, Hinkley Point C. It's hideous too. Just look at it. It is the ugliest thing imaginable. And it's surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Once they take the fuel out of the reactor and put it in the pool after the first year, all that food is poisoned for the next 100 years. Inspectors found that the companies have failed to implement appropriate arrangements for the effective planning, organization, control, monitoring, and review of preventive and protective measures. Well, there's just too many rats. The nuclear industry is just It's just terrible, terrible industry. India is expecting 100 gigawatts of new nuclear energy by 2047, but they're going to do it with small modular reactors that don't exist. Like, we see this all the time, this fake promise, and there's a lot of people out there will run up by small modular reactor stocks because they're influenced by these propagandas, these lies, these misrepresentations, these deceits, this dishonesty. Eagle Mountain City Council approves annexation plans for future nuclear energy. Poetry can trick AI models into revealing nuclear weapons secrets. It's one of my favorite ones today. Every day we get a couple of those guys. Nuclear expert explains how long one should really stand in a bunker, like in Fallout. They say for a couple of weeks. Oh, I stay there for a couple of weeks. Alex Wellerstein. Gee, I wonder who he is. Answers various questions about nuclear weapons and nuclear wars. These are the very last people you want to take a voice from, by the way. One should not linger there too long. Well, where else are you going to go? You can't leave. The time one would spend in such a bunker depends on the radioactive radiation. According to him, and so when you see that type of disclaimer put there, because that's a disclaimer, these bunkers in the real world were built to accommodate people for 2 weeks, perhaps even less. He also explained the nuclear bumpers. That's a nuclear bumper, Dana. I don't know. I'm getting tired here. I've been going nonstop here for an hour and 3/4. Not built to protect people from the impact of a nuclear weapon, but from the radioactive fallout. It's supposed to be a place that brings mass, ideally cement and earth, between you and the outside world, so that when the radioactive particles and atoms fall on you, something lies between you and the particles to reduce the amount of radiation. So the radioactive fallout pulses energy. So cesium-137 pulses energy for 600 feet every second. Right? And it's hard to perceive this. You can't feel it or smell it or taste it or touch it or hear it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. But it's pulsing energy through your neighbor's house, through their furniture, out to the outside, and across the garden and through your house or your other neighbor's house and in through your house and radiating you while you're sleeping or breathing or walking or hanging out or getting breakfast or whatever. And so, first off, radiation loves the lower part, right? So the idea originally was, you know, you're underground and the ground was kind of shield you from some of the damage. And if you go back and look at the old radioactive fallout videos from the 50s and 60s, you'll get a better understanding if you're not familiar with this. Look up, nuclear shelters. But the reality of it is, because you've got to have an air supply, the air comes in and it sinks to the lowest point of your house. It's going to be full of radiation. There is no nuclear bunker is not safe. Now, today's world, you can kind of get filters that contain some of it, but it's very sophisticated. You're talking spending $50,000, $60,000 on your filtering system. And so he conflates it. I kind of skipped over a couple things. He makes another stunning statement I want to cover before we jump again. The last one. Again. He compares it to lead aprons. Well, you're not supposed to wear the lead aprons because the X-ray machines will automatically increase their energy to get through the X-ray or the lead shield that you put on your body during X-rays, which means you're getting a brutal dose, maybe a lethal dose that'll kill you in a year or two. The industry is so evil, and it knew that. The greatest danger from the radiation exists for the first 2 weeks. Like, what are you talking about? It would decrease to 1% of its original radiation levels after that time. Like, what are you talking about? I've heard that narrative. It's like bananas and potato chips and walking in the sunshine. It's a lie. It's a disgusting lie, too. And the reason they tell that lie is because if they told you the truth, then you would know that all the nuclear bombs they set off worldwide, some of them, like the Soviet Union's biggest one was equal to 4,000 Nagasaki bombs, That radiation is all still out there today, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. You have 1,000 fuel pools doing the same thing all day long, releasing monstrous amounts from each fuel pool into your environment that'll never go away. And the majority of these places, if not all of them, are surrounded by farms. For you, typically hundreds of miles, if you take a satellite picture, you'll see mostly farms. Because you can't contain the radiation from the fuel pools. Advanced Defense System Nuclear Command Interface inside Putin's fully armored flying Kremlin. Bahrain, Saudi Arabia signs a memorandum of understanding on environmental nuclear radiation cooperation. Bahrain actually made it a death penalty to import nuclear fuel, use nuclear fuel into their country. Because they're worried about someone puts it in a wall, they end up dying eventually from those exposures every day. Trump regulators ripped from rushed approval of Bill Gates' nuclear reactor in Wyoming, which was the terrestrial, I can't even remember off the top of my head, I apologize. This is the rendition of it. Of course, we know there's no reality to it. So the Trump regulator, the TerraPower Natrium, this is the video we played earlier, was talking about the Natrium, which is a Gates disease factory. So one of the regulators, nuclear regulatory commissions for the current administration of the United States, was ripped, whatever that means, because they don't really get ripped, for rushed approval of Bill Gates' nuclear reactor. So it's very bizarre to actually see any kind of pushback. Wow. What are small modular reactors? They're a fantasy that's been trying to produce for 50 years. It's a fantasy. Like they say, Russia built one on a ship. It wasn't. It was a barge. It was a derelict barge. It was an experiment. It's a 15-story barge on top of that. And it has fuel pools. They call it fuel rooms. There's no such thing as a fuel room. It's fuel pools. So they've already changed fuel, which means they're hemorrhaging radiation from the barge. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. And it's in a pristine environment. The nuclear industry is your enemy, whether you understand it or not. If you hang around here for a little while, you'll definitely understand it. Don't be alarmed when West Valley nuclear plant tests emergency sirens. Now, I got to apologize to everybody because I had a package show for tonight. This is stories that I won't get to tonight. But on a lark, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to take all these headlines. This is a 24-hour news cycle. And I'll usually pick out the most salacious stories, right? When I'm doing the 24-hour news cycle. And these are stories I won't get to. And these are all really important stories, every friggin' one of them. And so what do? Do I do a 6-hour show every day from here on out and try to cover that? Britain seeks new sites for large nuclear plants. I would like to, if we had a co-host that can punch in 6 hours a day with me, because otherwise I'm not going to have a throat to talk out of. Britain seeks new sites for large nuclear disease factories. Sure, like we just showed you, so as we'll see, is infested with rats over and over and over this year, that they're talking about $48 billion USD to build it. The whole story is insane. I got to start rushing here. South Africa, ESCOM starts environmental assessment. Really, Australia or South Africa is going to do environmental assessment for the nuclear industry. And the nuclear industry is what? It's already got a reactor there, right? So they already got their insiders. There's zero possibility that won't go through. India eyes 5 indigenous nuclear small modular reactors by 2033. But we haven't seen any evidence that they actually have a design. Now, India, of course, they can do whatever they want. There's no checks and balances anywhere, let alone India. Bomb threat to the Ajmer Sharif nuclear plant. Search is underway. Teams of crime investigation departments, anti-terrorist squad, dog squads, bomb disposal units were deployed at both nuclear plants. Security personnel from 4 police stations with additional forces are conducting systematic checks, metal detectors, the officer says. Can you imagine how bad that's going to be if that goes? National Nuclear Security Administration clears Oklahoma of cesium-137 irradiators. Of course they cleared them. Whatever they want, gets cleared. The irradiators are used to imbue material with radiation, like blood in the hospitals, are critical in medical applications like blood treatment and cancer research. There is no treatment from radiation. Radiation is genocide. However, many existing irradiators contain the radioactive cesium-137, which poses a serious risk in the wrong hands, which is the nuclear industry's hands. In particular, this includes the removal of widely used cobalt-60. The scumbags to use that on the human man. Americium-241, which most of your smoke detectors have, and you throw into the dump. These are all dirty bombs. Cesium-137, iridium-192, which can be used to develop a radiological dispersal device for dirty bomb. That's what a nuclear fuel pool is, the world's biggest dirty bomb. Well, this is what a nuclear fuel pool can do in 20 hours. This happens to be Fukushima, but all fuel pools are doing the same thing currently because they have decades of reactor cores splitting atoms with no containment anymore. Once you take the reactor core, which is boiling water for millions of homes and businesses, out of the reactor and put it into the fuel pool, it's still splitting those atoms. There's no containment. The tall, skinny stacks are piped this stuff out. The pools are boiling all day long because you're splitting atoms. You really think the atoms are disappearing? Turning a fairy dust? Is that what you think? You're pro-nuclear, in particular I'm talking about. We have 1,000 fuel pools. That if you start up the same 1,000 fuel pools today, they're all brand new. And in 1 year, you're going to take the first lot out of your reactor core and put it into the fuel pools. 30 days later, each one of them will produce a plume like this. The Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. There's 10 decays, so after 25 days, all the Neptunium-239 you see in this 20-day model is decayed to plutonium-239, which was named after the devil because of his particular monstrous, insidious, hideous attributes. The cesium-137 clean-out marks Oklahoma as the 12th state territory to make the transition to safer annihilators. Alaska, Arizona, Delaware, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Nevada, New Mexico, Puerto Rico, South Dakota, the Dakotas, the Wyoming. Oklo stocks soared over 13%. Oklo is the strangest thing, isn't it? No product, no nothing. They get all the media, push them out there so the stocks will grow. And then the big financial institutions will cash in their 789 million shares, and steal the money from the investors. 2 weeks later, they'll do the whole thing again. And we watch this month after month after month, year after year after year, post-Fukushima. It's vicious. They're vicious. Global Symposium explores AI and nuclear energy synergies. Right, so they're telling you they need the AI, nuclear, right, but they don't have it. So they're stealing all the energy from the gas, oil, coal plants. They're driving up the prices for the consumers around the world, and they're building these things everywhere. They're building them everywhere. And they got no energy to run them, so they'll just steal whatever energy is there. They're the worst thing can happen to you. It's a total global takeover of our energy sectors. And they're not trying to build small modular reactors. They're sneaking this in by claiming that the small modular reactors are going to do the job. They don't even exist. Fancy controlling your own nuclear power plant. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, a few things. So imagine a future of clean energy. You got to use that word, otherwise they won't print it. The future is totally run, perfectly safe, mini reactors helping us. Yay, with as much electricity as we need. These are monsters that think and write and act that way. These are monsters that even entertain that is a conception. Reasons for Wi-Fi's last nuclear bid was knocked back by planners. Well, it wasn't because it's surrounded by farms, despite the fact that it's going to be surrounded by farms. Indian Navy delays delivery of new nuclear submarine. to 2026. What else is new? U.S. government plans to build 10 new nuclear reactors for $500 billion. So $50 billion a reactor? Makes sense. Nothing shocks me when it comes to nuclear scum. Climate activists from We Planet, environmental consequences of Germany nuclear phase-out are alarming. So here's the fake climate activists saying we got to have nuclear. There's lots of them out there. So this is where the site selected for the Nuclear Center for Expertise is actually the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's main building, but they're going to call it Nuclear Center of Expertise. And I'm not going to cover that tonight because I'm an idiot and didn't get the show finished. The show is over now, basically. But that was the show. Right now I'm supposed to be starting my show for tonight. What I've done for the last 2 hours is ran through as fast as I could the stories I can't get through today or any other day. That's the typical 24-hour news cycle is like here for me, is what stories do I cover? Are you like, it's just madness. I apologize that I can't. I apologize to the birds and the plants and the insects and the oceans and the fresh water and the Great Lakes that are being annihilated, that I can't seem to do enough. I do the best I can, but that's it. I am trying to get myself healthy every day. And yesterday was an hour and a half in the sauna. That was a big deal. And I got to keep that up for about a year, right? And I can scale it back to maintenance kind of levels. So the story tonight was, are they trying to poison the Great Lakes on purpose? Did they poison the Great Lakes on purpose, the nuclear industry? So these are all nuclear industries that are polluting the Great Lakes. This is not a shocking revelation. It's shocking. And so they are purposely targeting the third biggest aquifer on the entire planet, and not targeting, but targeted and successfully contaminated it, which feeds tens of thousands of farms, and there's tens of millions of people that are dependent upon that for their drinking water, for the showers, for their laundries, for their cooking. And so this was an intentional poisoning of the biggest aquifer on the planet. That is really stunning. And that is frightening. And it's unacceptable. My goodness. Yeah. Small modular reactors, slot machines. Thanks, Kevin. 3D printed fuel pelts. Which is already happening, by the way, folks. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. I got censored brutally again this week. It is what it is. Not much I can do about it. All I can do is just have faith that the right people are finding me. And clearly some of you are here. Did the nuclear industry with malice poison the Great Lakes for 80 years and millions of people and thousands of farms? All day, every day, for years and years and years and years. Yes, that's exactly what happened, Dana. Excuse me. I can't believe we made it, even though we never got to the news cycle. Bert to Jack. James put out another one of those classics by the looks of it. I love it. Bert the Jackalope. Remember Bert the Turtle? So that was the video we watched earlier, the Natrium, Bill Gates Reactors, Department of Energy intermission. And so we're going to close it on that there, but I'm going to play one of his songs after that, one of his Nuclear Exceptionalism, which is an anti-nuclear song that he put together a while back that I absolutely adore. We'll call it a night. We'll get back on Sunday for everybody. Just got to find... so I'm going to play that video, Bert the Jackalope, and then right after that, I'm going to play Nuclear Exceptionalism. There it is. And you have a great weekend. Hugs for everybody. Have a great day tomorrow, a great day Saturday. We're going to get hit with 110, gust of 110. It's going to get down to minus 17 or something wind chills. And it's going to be gusting like nuts and snow. It's going to be hideous. A good day to recover from a long week. Looking forward to Sunday. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the next show. Have a great night. Take care, everybody.
This is Bert the Jackalope. He knows what to do when modern reactors behave in ways the old cartoons never mentioned. Bert the Jackalope, Bert the Jackalope. When fallout arrives inland from far off damaged cores, Bert the Jackalope, Bert the Jackalope. Shows us how to hop around anthropogenic radiological sources. If your meter climbs above its normal background rate, or the CPM jumps higher than you ever anticipated.
I just realized I had the volume off for the end of it. Maybe it was longer. Crap. Did I turn the volume down early or something? What happened there? I'm going to play that song again. Doesn't look like anybody was yelling at me, so it must have been shorter than what I thought it was. My apologies. I'm an idiot. I was just, it threw me off, right? Because I realized the volume was down. I wasn't sure if it was down for very long. So I'm the Jackalope here tonight. Take care, everybody. We'll see everybody soon.
This is Bert the Jackalope. He knows what to do when modern reactors behave in ways the old cartoons never mentioned. Bert the Jackalope, Bert the Jackalope. When fallout arrives inland from far off damaged cores, Bert the Jackalope, Bert the Jackalope. Shows us how to hop around anthropogenic radiological sources. If your meter climbs above its normal background rate, or the CPM jumps higher than you ever anticipated, Bert hops over to a different spot until the detector settles into a safer plot. Bert doesn't rely on statements alone. He trusts measurement. If rainfall carries particles from ongoing reactor loss, the kind still documented from Fukushima's core meltdowns, Bert keeps away from low ground and drains, because runoff can concentrate persistent chains. Bert the Jackalope, Bert the Jackalope. When a counter signals alarms near a walkway or store, Bert the Jackalope, Bert the Jackalope. Moves a few quick hops to where readings are lower. Hop and hope, hop and hope, hop and hope, hop and hope. When the value exceeds anything reasonably achievable, hop and hope, hop and hope, hop and hope. A small adjustment keeps you on the safer side. If older pavement shows a spike from past dispersed debris, or ventilation indoors adds a count you didn't foresee, Bert adjusts course with a modest hoppy pace, just enough to reach a cleaner place. Remember, today's releases can travel farther than the films from the 50s ever imagined.
Bird the jackalope, bird the jackalope. If the day brings readings you were never prepped to expect. Bird the jackalope, bird the jackalope. Uses simple hops to limit effect. Stay aware like Bert. Respond with calm actions, clear thinking, and respect for readings in a world where Fukushima cores are still melting.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up inside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried.